Okay, so in the last video, I told you that we would deal with some settings on the next one, and this is what we're going to do now. So one of the things that I like, for instance, I like my text to be larger, especially because I record videos, so that's one thing to think about. You might like it small. Maybe you want it smaller than it is in the default because you have really good eyes, right? Or maybe your autocomplete isn't behaving the way that mine is and you'd like for it to. There are a lot of different things that we need to take a look at that will make your life a lot easier. So first of all, we're going to go up to, if you're on a Mac, you'll go to Dreamweaver and Preferences. If you're on Windows, you'll go to Edit, and down at the bottom, towards the bottom, there will be Preferences. So regardless of what operating system, go to Preferences. So some of these might look a little different. On your screen than mine, because I have some stuff that I've changed over the years, and if it remembered any of my old preferences, then, you know, it remembered my old preferences. So I have it set up. I think a lot of these are default options too. Under General, for the category, we're going to open documents and tabs. If you don't want to always show that start screen, you don't have to. The one that, gives you a choice to open a new file or whatever. I don't necessarily like it, so I'm going to do that. I'm going to turn it off. This is where you turn it on and turn it off. If you miss having that start screen, you can come and do this. Reopen documents on startup. I don't necessarily want to do that. I don't generally need to have my files open up for me from the last time I used it. I do want it to warn if it's a read-only file and enable related files. Those are all important things. Let's see, this is nice, switch to plain paragraph after heading, so that way when you've got heading levels, it doesn't just keep making a bunch of heading levels. That's not normal. That's not what you would normally do. Basically, most of these are the way that they are because it's the right thing to do. It's a good reason, right? So you can take a pause on this and take a look at that. I'm going to hit apply to make that one change that I have. There's some accessibility issues. Code format. I like to set mine up like this. And we're going to click on code hints. Now this is really important. Yours might not look like this. This is basically saying, when do I close the tags? Well, it's after I finish typing the last angle bracket of the opening tag. It'll automatically autocomplete. So if you were to take a look at this, hold on, I'm going to hit close real quick because I can't do it. It's that same thing that I told you about before, where if I come in here and I did, let's say an H2, as soon as I hit this tag, it autocompletes for me. It sticks the cursor in the center so that I can just start typing like heading 2, right? So that's how that's working. So let's go back to code hints. So that's really important. I also like all these other things to be checked off too. Well, at least these 4 items at the bottom. Okay, and then if I go over here to code rewriting, there's some different things in here that you might pay attention to, but this is the way I have mine set up, and I would recommend leaving it like this. And if you go to copy paste, this is actually pretty important. So whenever you are copying and pasting stuff from one document to another, then, right now my default is text with structure plus basic formatting like bold and italic. I don't like to pull in styles. Like if you're coming from HTML, I don't want to pull that in. You could also just do it as text only. So it's up to you. You can play around with these different settings, but sometimes you can kind of get in a little bit of a hairy mess if you pull too much formatting in. And down here, it's also very important. These are going to be for like white space things and for word, paragraph spacing, things like that. But what's really important is this is not selected for some reason on mine, but you should select it. Convert smart quotes to straight quotes, and I'm going to hit apply. That must not be a default setting, right? Smart quote is the kind of is the kind of quote like that has a special character where it's like maybe a curved quote that comes from Word. Those are, in terms of like graphic design, the proper types of quotes to use. Straight quotes are like foot marks and inch marks that are straight up and down. They have no styling whatsoever. Well, in code view, you only want straight quotes. You don't want smart quotes or ones that come with special formatting. You only want straight quotes. Otherwise, it'll screw up your code. So click that one for sure, hit apply, and let's look at CSS styles. So this is important. I like to use shorthand, and you're going to see that I use shorthand in a lot of stuff that I'm doing. So I personally like margin and padding shorthand. You can leave that off if you don't feel confident in shorthand. Shorthand would be like in margin or padding, for instance, if you have just margin and then it's like 4 different numeric positions that indicate sort of the clockwise top, right, bottom, and left, for instance. I don't like to use shorthand for font because font is one of the really strict ones where if you don't get the order in which you're putting, the pieces in right, it will not work at all. Even I sometimes forget what that is. So I don't use shorthand for font typically. And then the other thing about shorthand with font is that once you use shorthand for font, There's some things that will not, it won't always work, like once you switch to longhand, and so fonts is one I just leave alone. Anyway, the other thing, like I do use CSS prefixes for WebKit, Firefox, Opera. Those are ones that would be like for gradients, things like that. Okay, so then I also use according to the settings above is what I use for shorthand. So I don't just use it if it's originally used in or in the original file. So this is how I do it. I'm not going to get into extract right now, and I'm not going to get into file compare. Um, and you can look at this. I'm not going to get into that. For fonts, I generally leave the settings alone with exception to the size. So for instance, I want for my fixed font, I want that to be larger. And then the other thing for code view, I want that to be, let's do 14. And if I hit apply, you see automatically back here it gets bigger. Now you might not want it that big in your computer screen. I like to have it large so that when I'm doing recordings, it's easier for you guys to see actually. So I can also do 12 points, and that's even better than what it was. It was at 10. So I might leave it at 12, and I might switch back and forth depending on what it is that we're doing. In fact, I'll leave it at 14. Okay. And you can fool around with the code view font and stuff, but just, be aware that this is a pretty good one. If you start monkeying with it too much, then it actually might get harder to read. It might look prettier to you, but it might get harder to read and maybe even see like where the spaces are and stuff. So when you go to get, this is where later, if we get into the GitHub stuff, this is where you could set some of the different settings up. Highlighting, if you don't like the colors natively that Dreamweaver is using, you can change them here. I'm going to kind of skip through some of these things. For the interface, this is where you can go back and change the color again. I'm not going to get into invisible elements right now. That's something that, or as we get further into the class, we'll do. For new document, right now it should default to HTML with a doc type of HTML5. That's what you want. You could, let's say that you're taking a PHP class. If you wanted the default to be a PHP file so that it always has a PHP ending, then you can do it that way. If it's just easier, that's fine. So that's totally fine. And then this is for the new feature guides, the thing that I kept dismissing everything. It would drive me crazy. This is the contextual tips. So like once you close them, they won't come back. If you hit reset, they will come back, right? So we're not doing anything in the Mat 165 class with PHP, but if you're taking a different class where we are doing stuff with PHP, then you would want to make sure that you're using the most current version of PHP. In this case, Dreamweaver is supporting up to 7.1. PHP does come in a much higher version, but this is a very stable version, and it's what Dreamweaver is up to. Real-time preview is important. So this is where we can set so that if we're doing like just a quick preview in a browser, then without actually like opening a browser and going straight to the website, like if we're just doing local temporary files, you can do that. Now, if you want to see that, you want to set your primary browser. I'm going to set my primary browser to be Chrome. That's just the one that I like, preferably. And the secondary browser, let's say, is Firefox. And the reason I'm doing it that way is because Chrome and Safari generally have very, very similar rendering because they're based on the core rendering engine is similar. It's based off of what's called WebKit. So, and Opera is too. But Firefox is quite different. And so if you're doing testing, you might want to test in like either Safari and Firefox or Chrome and Firefox. Anyway, the other thing too is this preview using temp files. This allows you to do this without actually saving your code, and it creates a temporary copy for your preview. So you can come here and use that if you want. I'm going to hit apply. Site. This is about the remote stuff and the local stuff. And then you've got these other settings, and we're not going to go over all of those. So we'll close this. Those are some settings that you might want to pay attention to, and that's the end of this demo.